In Biblical Aramaic, gvar is a situating noun. Let me start with the linguistic category known in English as a personal noun. A typical personal noun regards its referent not only as a person, but also in terms of some inherent quality, an attribute. For example, the English noun giant labels a person as being extremely tall. Similarly, the most frequently attested personal noun in the Bible's Aramaic passages, enash, is often used to classify its referent in terms of characteristic attributes. Enash is employed to refer to human beings and human appearance, as opposed to animals on the one hand, and as opposed to the deity on the other. In contrast, the nouns in a tiny class known as situating nouns work rather differently. A situating noun regards its referent in terms of the situation that the speaker is depicting. It is part of the vocabulary for situations, orienting one's audience to a situation of interest. As such, the mention of a situating noun points not only to its referent, but also to concern for the situatedness of that referent, its place or position within the situation that the speaker is describing. Indeed, a situating noun profiles its referent as a defining participant in the depicted situation. A situating noun gives almost no other information about its referent. It is a linguistic device that can make for efficient communication. Even though the speaker says relatively little, the audience can quickly draw a mental picture of the basic situation. My favorite example in English is the classic cry, "Man overboard!" Those two words immediately evoke a situation of distress. The speaker wishes to urgently communicate about an emergency. The word man, which is the situating noun for persons in English, enables the situation to be sketched succinctly and grasped promptly by the audience. The person's attributes are beside the point. Their age, gender, social class, race, hair color, stature, etc. does not matter. That is why the typical characteristics of a situating noun include that it is a short word that is easy to pronounce, and that it is usually not used to classify its referent. Rather, it is used prototypically to sketch a situation in terms of one or more participants. Now, although we don't usually think about it consciously, the need to communicate schematically about situations is a common everyday occurrence. Rather than just describe a lot of irrelevant details about a place, for example, we just give the lay of the land. So although the class of situating nouns is very small, they are actually used quite frequently. Is Biblical Aramaic among the languages that have a situating noun for persons? My hypothesis is yes, for Aramaic has gvar, a personal noun that appears 21 times in the Aramaic portions of the Bible, including its plural form, guvrin. In all 21 instances, this noun appears in the same kind of communicative context. The speaker is depicting a situation in a schematic manner. There are various ways of carrying out this function. I will now briefly illustrate 6 of them from this corpus. Gvar is used to introduce a participant into the discourse. I've found a gvar among the exiles of Yehud who can make the meaning known to the king. Gvar is used to comment on a situation of interest. Those guvrin pay no mind to you, O king. Gvar is used to ask a question about a situation of interest. Didn't we throw 3 guvrin into the fire bound? Guvrin is used to report on a situation of interest. We also asked their names to inform you so that we could write down the names of the Guvrin who are their leaders. Gvar is used to express the desired outcome of a directive. I hereby issue an order, expenses shall be given diligently to these Guvrin. And Gvar is used to describe how a known situation is modified. Then those Guvrin burst in and found Daniel praying. Yes, in all of these cases, the referents are adult males, but that fact is incidental. In most cases, that fact is already known to the audience for the utterance. So why does the speaker bother to use the noun Gvar? Not only that, Gvar is often the preferred term. That is, even in contexts where the speaker clearly has attractive alternative ways of making reference, where uttering the proper name of the referent would have been less ambiguous, where relying upon a mere verbal inflection, that is, no substantive term at all, would have been easier to say, and where deploying a different noun as a label, such as Yehudayin, Jews, would have been more informationally rich. In other words, Gvar seems to be the default term in the vocabulary for discussing situations. What all of the biblical usages have in common is that the speaker is depicting a situation and doing so in a schematic manner. Another noteworthy aspect about the Bible's situation-oriented usages of Gvar is that this noun functions consistently across many speakers. For although Gvar appears only in the books of Ezra and Daniel, it is uttered by a total of 9 distinct voices, namely the book's 2 respective narrators, plus the reported speech of characters that include 3 different kings, a queen, and various royal officials and administrators. Under the very plausible assumption that the text's audience was supposed to experience this way of speaking as normal, the widespread distribution is robust evidence that the preference that we have seen for employing Gvar when sketching a situation is truly a feature of the Aramaic language. It is not merely a matter of the personal style of one author, or a locally circumscribed lectal variant, or a scribal gloss during textual transmission. Now, interestingly, if we look more closely at how this noun is used, we find a couple of oddities. Fortunately, as I will now show, the concept of a situating noun can explain both of these usages. The first oddity is that, as lexicographers have implicitly noted, the presence of Gvar is superfluous, informationally speaking, when it appears as the head noun in some compound referring expressions. That is, on the informational level, it does not provide any relevant information about the referent beyond what is implied by the second term of the same referring expression, which is capable of serving as a referring expression by itself. The 3 biblical cases are in Daniel chapter 3. Let us take a closer look at 2 of them. In verse 12, and similarly in verse 8, but not shown here, if Guvrin were omitted, the sentence would still be grammatical, for the gentilic Yehudayin would serve as the head of the subject, and Yehudayin would reliably refer to the same referent. Likewise, in verse 20, if Guvrin were dropped, the sentence would still be grammatical, for there would be a substantive complement of the verb pointing to the indirect object of the emperor's command, Gibare Chayil, and that noun phrase, Gibare Chayil, would reliably refer to the same referent. These grammatical and referential redundancies are a strong sign that the presence of our noun Gvar accomplishes something else aside from what normal substantives do. As a functional linguist has noted, the co-occurrence of two formal means of making reference within one utterance would indicate that these means code different functions. Indeed, biblical translators into English customarily render the noun phrases as certain Jews and as some strong guards. But how does a noun actually yield that kind of meaning? My answer is, it does so by profiling its referent as a situation-defining participant. It quietly flags the referent as essential for the audience to grasp the situation. These aren't just any old Yehudayin and Gibarei Chayil. Rather, these are the Yehudayin and the Gibarei Chayil whose presence in the scene need to be accounted for before you can say that you understand the situation. The noun flag brings its referent into sharp relief as an individuated entity. In contrast, the other instances of the gentilics, Kasdayin and Yehudayin, involve situations where the referenced participants are treated as givens. As givens, the speaker need not go to the trouble of flagging them with gvar. Indeed, it would be confusing if they were so labeled. Thus, my hypothesis accounts not only for the presence of gvar when it is conspicuous, but also for its absence in similar referring expressions. The second usage that is odd for a personal noun occurs in one very clear case. A non-human figure who is believed to be a divine being is nonetheless referred to with the label gvar. This is found likewise in Daniel chapter 3, according to which King Nebuchadnezzar has ordered that 3 Babylonian Jews be thrown into a fiery furnace. Yet he reports seeing 4 figures in that furnace. That is, even while the king labels all 4 figures with the term gvar, he acknowledges that he does not believe the 4th one to be human. Apparently, the label gvar is not restricted in scope to human beings. Now, such usage is not surprising for a situating noun. It is well attested, not only in Biblical Hebrew, but also in English. And it can be explained within cognitive linguistics as consistent with this noun's classic situating function. Such a function can be readily and conventionally extended to keeping track of non-human entities for the sake of efficient communication about the situation. In this case, in Daniel, the term gvar enables the king to quickly call attention to an astounding development. As I now prepare to sum up my findings, time constraints permit me to mention only in passing that there is supporting extra-biblical evidence. Most of the same functions carried out by the usage of gvar are attested either in the Sefire Treaty inscriptions in present-day Syria from several centuries earlier, or in various roughly contemporaneous letters and legal documents from the Jews of Elephantine, Egypt. Those sources also attest to additional uses of gvar that are characteristic of a situating noun. To sum up, we have seen that the noun gvar is consistently used to carry out the function of fostering the depiction of a situation in a schematic manner, while telling us little else about its referent apart from the essential fact of participation in that situation. Furthermore, there are 2 types of attested usage of gvar that are anomalous when it is viewed as an ordinary noun, but normal for situating nouns. Similarly, distinctive patterns of usage are attested for gvar in extra-biblical sources. Finally, of course, gvar meets the initially stated criterion of being a short and easy-to-pronounce word. So in conclusion, like ish in Biblical Hebrew, gvar should henceforth be classified as a situating noun for persons, and Aramaic is one of the languages with situating nouns.